Hi everybody, welcome to The Average Gal's Garden. I'm Sal, the Average Gal. In today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about the different resources and places you can go for inspiration for your average garden. One of the things I did right after I moved here was head to the local bookstore to see what kind of information I could get about what would grow here in my area. As you can see, I have a whole stack of books here, and I particularly like books because I love the tactile feel, and the pictures are beautiful inside. Most of them have beautiful color pictures. Some of them are specific to Florida, and some are more dealing with the entire sort of southern region of the US. And these are really great for inspiration for you. And of course, the internet now has a plethora of stuff out there, and so I quite often do go to the internet to get information about specific plants or how I might need to handle them. So I'm not saying that you need to go out and buy a lot of books or anything like that. This is how I like to do it, and to get my information for when I started out the garden. This was a whole new state and area for me to live in, and I wasn't all that familiar with the climate or what was possible to grow here. And over time, I've learned that it's really pretty amazing that a lot of the plants that I can grow here in Florida, I could also grow where I lived before in the high desert of Las Vegas. It sort of boggles my mind sometimes how I can walk into a nursery and I can see the exact same shrub that grew in a climate that was so dry most of the time and super hot. Although it is super hot here as well, the humidity is really strong. Also, believe it or not, in Vegas, for those of you who aren't familiar with the climate around there, it gets very cold in the wintertime, very cold and dry, lots of wind. Here, where I live in my particular area, being so close to the Gulf Coast, I do not get that many freezing temperatures here. But a few miles inland from us, between Tampa and Orlando, they get some pretty hard freezes a couple of times a year, and that can be very detrimental to the commercial crops that are grown here. We're very famous for strawberries that are grown, and we have a huge strawberry festival. Of course, they had to forego that this year because of the COVID emergency, so that's a shame that happened, but I've been blessed that I live so close to there because I get fresh, beautifully grown, ripe strawberries, never frozen, that come right from the farm into the regular grocery stores here. In this episode today, I really want to just talk about some of the options that people might have. The average gardener who is, like I said, I'm not a horticulturist by any means, but or a master gardener, but please reach out, go to your library, go to a bookstore, look online, Amazon books, look for stuff that books that may help you in the region that you're living in, and that could help you immensely in deciding what kind of plants that you need to buy so that you have better success in your garden. So a sort of important resource I'm going to point out right now is this USDA cold hardiness zone map. A lot of emphasis is put on the USDA maps, and basically the USDA, for those of you who aren't in the States or may not know, it's the US Department of Agriculture. And I'm sure they do this in other countries as well as here. The USDA creates this growing zone map that they can assign all different plants the rating of the zone that they will do best in. And this is based totally on what the average coldest temperature is in your particular location. Now, I want to also throw in the bag here, in the mix, that it's not absolutely, in my opinion, and of course I'm not a master gardener, but not every single plant that they say will do well in your zone actually does well, I have found, and some that they say won't do well, I've had some good success with. And a lot of that comes down to the microclimate that is around your yard. So out of all of these books that I have, and all of them have their pluses and their minuses, One of my oldest and best favorite ones is this one called Tough Plants for Florida Gardens. It's by Felder Rushing. There is it. I'm not sure you can get this anymore. It's probably out of print because I did purchase it 15 years ago. But I really, really love his take and the attitude that he has about being a gardener in Florida. And he's talking about the Hardiness Maps. He does not include them in this book. And he says it's one simple reason. It's based on the average low temperatures, and a lot of times in Florida, they're way off the mark. Instead of getting all bogged down by what your governing body or whoever it is that determines your hardiness zones, you can spread out and branch out. Now, there are certainly things that aren't going to grow here where I am. The state is super long and it's very narrow, and all the way up in the north, in the Panhandle, by the border of Georgia and along that area, they get snow and they get very cold temperatures up there. And gradually, as you move down the state towards Miami and the Keys, it becomes more tropical, subtropical. I'm sort of in the middle of the state. Sometimes we get freeze, but not normally exactly where my house is located because I'm so close to the coast. But across the whole central, if you went sort of between Tampa and Orlando, you would find that inland, where they aren't as close to the Gulf, they will freeze. So what this author is suggesting for Florida anyways is that instead of looking at the hardiness zones by the USDA, which are based on the coldest temperatures, that the American Horticultural Society has a heat zone map. And to get a better idea, in my case, about what plants would thrive best in this environment where I'm at, is to overlay the two maps. Now, I'm an average gardener, so I'm not about to do that. But for those of you who are interested in pursuing that, do that experiment yourself. But again, this particular book, Tough Plants, I really, really respect the guy, and I love what he has to say in here. And he's got a plethora of plants that do super well all across all areas of Florida. And I actually have some of these plants I have now, and I'm maybe going to introduce some more as I reimagine what my garden is. One other thing that I want to mention about when we're talking about the different climates. All around your house, this is going to be true for every average gardener out there. If you don't already know this, there are microclimates. Places around your house that are protected or sheltered. You can sometimes massage plants that don't normally or wouldn't fall within the category that the USDA has set down, or the Horticulture Society, that would thrive in that environment. Say there is something that doesn't like the full hot sun. I have places on the north side of my yard that get absolutely no sun or very little sun. I also have some neighbors that have some very tall trees that block some of that. So that in itself on that side of the yard is a microclimate. It's not going to be the 98-degree temperatures that we get or more in the backyard where I've got all the concrete around the pool and not a lot of shade right now. So a plant that normally might not thrive here may thrive perfectly well on that side of the house. Another thing that helps create microclimates are fences and borders. So if you live in an area that's super windy, maybe you're near the coast or anywhere where there's like a lot of flat land where the winds can get going, if you have a wall, or if you plant a wall of shrubs or tall shrubs or trees, just in front of that, all of a sudden now you've got a little microclimate, and you'd be surprised about the things that you could grow there. So I don't want to see anybody waste a lot of money buying plants that won't thrive in your environment by any means, shape, or form. But I also don't want to deter people from buying something that they love and trying it out, just because the zone maps tell you that it won't grow in your area. You just have to give it a try, I think. Give it a try. That's what I do. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you just gotta live with it. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about my specific area and what drives the weather in my area. And I know a lot of you are going to think, what the heck is she doing with this paper map? I'm a little old school, and I know that this could be done probably electronically. Somehow I could embed it into the presentation for you. But I'm sort of old school, and I love old paper maps. Hopefully a lot of you still can enjoy that. And I can't believe I actually still had one of these floating around my house somewhere, but I did. The area that I live in is right here. This bit of water right here that goes in, that is Tampa Bay. And Orlando is up here. It's not exactly straight across from us, it's slightly north from where the Tampa area is. And my apologies to the people up in the panhandle up here. I sort of folded that part of the map under, didn't mean to alienate any of you, but this is really about my average garden in St. Petersburg area. So the county I live in, it's called Pinellas County, and it's right here. This little thumb. And you can see the entrance of the mouth to Tampa Bay. And the city is actually called Tampa, not Tampa Bay. It's actually Tampa. Tampa Bay is the bay itself. I live in Pinellas County. Here's my little pointer. I'm close to the coast over here. So where I live is sort of in the middle of the state here. Here's Lake Okeechobee down here. And the weather conditions in Florida can change drastically, as I said earlier, from the north where they get freezes regularly, get a winter, although not like a Canadian winter, but they definitely get a winter up there, to the area, part of the state that I'm in the mid here, which we really have what they call the wet season and the dry season. Although we can get some very cold temperatures, I mentioned before, most of the time that freezing happens in this area around here. Occasionally, maybe a day or two, we might have something that happens in the peninsula. But as you can see, on either side, we're surrounded by water. And so that sort of keeps it a little more temperate here, and we have less freezing issues. But we have a wet and a dry season. So the wet season is what we're going into right now. It's mid-June here in 2020. It's mid-June, and we have already been in semi-summer-like weather for the last I would say 2 or 3 weeks. The temperatures are up in the 90s, and we get the rains will come in the afternoons, and so we're sort of like in the rainy season. Also, hurricane season starts June 1st. It runs through I think November 1st. So we are susceptible to storms that are coming and or could be coming across usually they start in the Atlantic. Usually they start over here in the Atlantic, or here, let me turn this a little bit. They would start over here in the Atlantic somewhere, and they end up coming down into the Gulf of Mexico. This is the Gulf of Mexico here, and they come up and usually obliterate everybody up north of us. Thank goodness, knock on wood. So we only had that one really bad storm since I've been here in 15 years that sort of came in I think it came in just maybe north of us a little bit. And so one of the things that we do the wet season and we have the dry season. The dry season is during the winter months here, and that's when we grow our vegetables. Most people would be packing up their vegetables and getting cold. In our area, the fall is when you would actually start planting stuff because the days are warmer, the nights are cooler, and it's not as humid. So during the summer months, we get a flow of moisture that comes up through the Gulf of Mexico into here, and that's what brings us most of our humidity. It comes in from the Caribbean and off of the Gulf of Mexico. And when we have storms here, which happen almost daily or every couple of days, what causes those is where the two winds meet. And a lot of you will already know this, and I am certainly no meteorologist, so I'm just sort of giving the people who don't know sort of a little overview of what the climate is like where I'm at and how that certainly can affect what we try to grow. So what will happen is we get a prevailing breeze from the East Coast that comes across the state like this. And then we have a Gulf breeze that will come this way. And wherever these two meet, they cause friction, and that's where the storms happen. And if any of you ever watch a weather radar in Florida, you will quite often see a long, skinny line of massive storms that are going through the state. Could be over here if the Gulf Coast winds are more prevalent, or more often it's somewhere in here. Lakeland gets hit a lot for some reason. I'm not quite sure. That used to be sort of a running joke. Poor Lakeland got, slammed again. But you will see a long, skinny line of storms, and that's where these two breezes converge. Sometimes the East Coast is more prevalent instead of the West Coast, and when that happens, we get it right over us. Oftentimes, we have a storm that is brewing here, and when it gets, and I'm not talking a hurricane, I'm just talking like your regular storms coming through, and for some reason, when it comes over my house, it splits and sort of goes, it sort of opens up a little bit and misses my house. Or if it comes from this direction, the same thing, it looks like, oh, we're going to get slammed, and all of a sudden it sort of breaks up and passes me over. So we're sort of lucky that way that we don't always get hit. The downside of that is I don't always get rain. So it means more irrigation has to happen, and that will be something that we're going to discuss my irrigation problems in one of the other episodes. So anyways, for those of you who are interested, you can pull this up anywhere on a map of Florida, anywhere off the internet, if you're so inclined to do something that is electronic instead of this physical paper piece of tactile thing that I'm using. But like I said, I particularly love this the map sort of situation. So basically, this is where I'm located, in this Pinellas County area, and it's a lot of snowbirds come here. I will tell you, it gets super crowded in the wintertime. The traffic gets heavy, and but we have beautiful weather, which is why you can imagine why people obviously want to come here, because the weather's fantastic. It also, as I said before, affords us a beautiful sunset views. This is the west, by the way. To the west, to the west. So this was a little overview today about where to get some of your inspiration, or where I've gotten my inspiration for my average garden, and also geographically where I was located and what some of the weather patterns and things that I have to deal with in my average garden. So I hope you guys join me again for another episode, and in the meantime, stay safe and be happy.